Chapter 1. The Shadow Man. Since as far back as I can recall, I have been constantly on the move. It feels like an eternity has passed since I first started running. Yet, no matter how fast or how far I sprinted, the shadowy figure always managed to track me down. His presence was an ever-present force, always looming over me. He seemed to anticipate my every move, leading me into traps and dead ends that left me scrambling in desperation. My heart raced with fear, my body was drenched in sweat as I paused to catch my breath. Surveying my surroundings, I meticulously examined every detail of the labyrinth I found myself in. The towering city buildings cast a foreboding shadow, their neglected and dilapidated structures adding to the eerie atmosphere. As I stood there, feeling the weight of the Shadow Man's gaze upon me, I knew that I had to find a way out of this maze before it was too late. The scene before me resembled something out of an apocalyptic movie. Debris littered the city streets, and there was a noticeable absence of plant life. Abandoned vehicles obstructed the roads, with broken windshields and dents making them seem like obstacles waiting to be navigated. Some cars lay on their sides, as if a giant toddler had knocked them over in a fit of rage. A few street lamps flickered weakly, casting a dim glow that barely illuminated my surroundings. Despite the desolate landscape, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My shadowy companion lurked in the darkness, his presence felt everywhere. With trepidation, I continued walking until I reached an intersection. Uncertain of which way to go, I scanned each street, but couldn't see far enough to determine if any of them led to dead ends. Right. I'll take a right. After what felt like an eternity of walking, a glimmer of light caught my eye in the distance. Intrigued, I quickened my pace towards the source of the illumination. To my surprise, the light emanated from a brightly colored car engulfed in flames. I hesitated, a sense of unease creeping over me. Could this be some sort of trap? The burning vehicle stood alone on the desolate road, intensifying my suspicions. My heart raced as I cautiously approached the fiery spectacle. The pounding of my heart reverberated in my ears, drowning out all other sounds. A peculiar noise emanated from the car, growing louder as I drew nearer. It resembled the frantic gasps of someone in the throes of a panic attack. Kneeling, I peered inside the vehicle, only to find it empty, leaving me with more questions than answers. So, where was the noise coming from? Once I regained my footing, I approached the rear of the vehicle and discovered a figure curled up in the fetal position. The individual's posture made it difficult to discern their gender. Their hands shielded their face as they emitted a chilling sound while trembling. A lump formed in my throat, hindering my ability to speak. My voice quivered as I asked, "Are you okay?" The figure remained silent and did not acknowledge my presence. Had I spoken too softly? I cleared my throat and tried again. "Excuse me? Do you need help?" Once again, my presence went unnoticed. "Please allow me to help you," I offered, extending my hand towards the figure. Just as my fingers were about to touch their shoulder, the being abruptly turned to face me. Startled, I recoiled and let out a horrified scream. Its face. There wasn't one. Devoid of eyes, nose, ears, or mouth, the creature stood before me, a sight too terrifying to put into words. I took a few steps back as the being rose to its feet, emitting a deafening sound. It began to move towards me slowly, its hand outstretched in my direction. I didn't know what to make of the terrifying situation, so I did the only thing that made sense. I ran. As I sprinted back in the direction I had come from, I glanced over my shoulder to witness the shadows enveloping the figure behind me. A wave of relief washed over me, but I was aware that it would be short-lived. And I was right. While fleeing, the streetlights that had been guiding my path suddenly extinguished, leaving me in complete darkness. Panic set in as I realized I could potentially come face to face with my Shadow Man. How do I get out of here? I thought to myself. If there's no way out, Then maybe I need to find a safe place to hide. There has to be a way out of here. As I strolled past the row of deserted buildings, a flicker of light caught my attention. The sudden illumination was a peculiar sight, as these buildings had always remained shrouded in darkness before. Intrigued, I approached the window from which the light emanated, hoping to catch a glimpse of what lay inside. To my astonishment, I saw my best friend Sara standing in the room. Her tear-streaked face bore a look of sheer terror and despair. Without a moment's hesitation, I called out her name and began frantically pounding on the window, desperate to reach her. She remained unresponsive to my calls and the banging on the window. Determined to get her attention, I knocked on the window even louder, disregarding the possibility of breaking the glass, all the while calling out her name with increasing volume. Despite my efforts, she continued to ignore me. Then, suddenly, Sara jumped. I believed that I had finally caught her attention, and felt a wave of relief wash over me that she had finally reacted. However, I soon realized that my assumption was far from the truth. She was startled when the door to the room burst open with an incredible amount of force. My friend was standing in the middle of the room, slowly retreating from the entrance, her eyes fixed on whatever or whoever was in front of her. As she dropped to her knees, I could hear her pleading with some unseen entity, begging it to release her. A crimson light began to emanate from the room, gradually enveloping everything. I tried to keep my gaze on Sara, but she disappeared into the light. Just when I thought I couldn't bear the intense red glow any longer, it slowly dimmed. That's when I saw her lifeless body sprawled on the floor. "Sara!" I cried out, pounding on the window with increasing intensity. A deep, sinister laugh echoed through the room. Tears streamed down my face as the menacing laughter taunted me, enveloping the scene in darkness like the final act of a tragic play. I stared into the pitch-black room, paralyzed with fear and unable to move or think. As the ominous laughter faded, a chilling breath brushed against the back of my neck. I stood frozen as a cold hand, with unusually long fingers, gripped my right wrist. Fear consumed me, causing my heart to falter and my breath to escape me. Suddenly, I was forcefully turned around to come face to face with the Shadow Man. This imposing figure towered over my 5-foot 2-inch frame, by at least 2 to 3 feet. His face was concealed by a black hooded cloak, but his hands, pale and almost gray, were visible. His long, spindly fingers seemed out of proportion with the rest of his body. "Well, well," his deep, booming voice rumbled. "It seems the cat has finally caught the mouse." I remained frozen, unable to find my words. "Aw, what's the matter, Ember?" The Shadow Man chuckled. "What seems to be troubling you, Ember?" I was caught off guard by the familiarity with which he addressed me. This nightmare was unlike anything I had ever experienced before, especially coming face to face with the Shadow Man. "How does he know my name?" "I know all about you, Ember." His voice echoed as if he could read my mind. "I know more about you than you know about yourself," he continued with a hint of amusement in his tone. His words lingered in the air, leaving me with a sense of dread. I looked up into the darkness that obscured his face, rendered speechless. My mind raced to the figure that had barged in before my friend fell to the ground, unmoving. The man smirked as he uttered, "Your friend is insignificant." She was weak and inconsequential. A chilling laugh slipped from his mouth. "I have more pressing matters to discuss with you. That girl you consider a friend would only hinder us." His words ignited a fire within me. "Don't talk of my friend that way. Who the hell do you think you are?" He laughed in amusement. "Well, look who suddenly grew a backbone." I fixed my gaze on him, my voice trembling with anger as I spoke. "You have no right to determine who lives and who dies in this world." However, I found myself silently questioning his motives. He stood before me, a living embodiment of death, devoid of the scythe. The imposing figure let out another chuckle. Despite his eerie demeanor, he seemed to find amusement in our confrontation. "Dear Ember," he began, his words sending a chill down my spine. I am far more sinister than death. I was taken aback by the revelation. How do you know what I'm thinking? I asked in disbelief. As soon as the words left my mouth, the entity's demeanor changed from amusement to frustration as he turned away from me. This is why I cannot stand humans. He let out a disapproving sigh. Everything, all of the potential that you people hold is completely wasted upon your species. If you hate our kind so much, then why am I here? Why do you keep following me? Why do you keep bringing me to this nightmarish realm time and time again? As the figure turned to me once more, he began, Because you hold great value to me. This guy is crazy. Do not call me crazy, he bellowed. Centuries I have wasted upon you, watching you grow, rediscovering your secrets, waiting for you to gain enough strength to carry out my plans. He trailed off. What do you mean by centuries? I replied skeptically. And what makes you so sure that I would help you? He chuckled. Do not ever think you are capable of deceiving me, Ember. I always know where you are, what you're thinking, what breaks you, and what makes you give in. I am aware of all your failures, even the ones you have long forgotten. He moved closer. So do not even dare to think you are smart enough to mislead me. I became cocky. Obviously, if I am the only person who can help you, then when I say no, I mean it when I say I will not help you. You can imprison me, you can torture me, but you cannot kill me. Another uncontrollable laugh erupted from the figure. Not kill you? I honestly couldn't care less whether you live or die. It's merely an inconvenience when you die. However, you always turn back up, making it quite easy to track you down. I always turn back up? I replied inquisitively. What are you talking about? The cloaked man let out a long, frustrated sigh before turning away in exasperation. As he grumbled under his breath, I saw an opportunity to escape. I had spent most of my life running from him, so why not a little more? Suddenly his voice rang out, You cannot run from me, Ember. Before I could react, I felt his icy grip around my throat. Despite my efforts to leave him behind, I had only managed to run straight into his clutches. Gasping for air, I struggled as his hold tightened and he pushed me against a nearby building. Found you. Desperately, I grabbed at his wrist and managed to croak out, Who are you? My name is Lucienne, and you are coming with me. His voice was stern. You are mine. No, I croaked, unable to speak any further. Rage gripped me at his possessiveness. He brought his head closer to mine, but I still couldn't see any details of his face. Why do you say no, my dear? Don't you want to come with me? Panic overwhelmed my senses. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I was convinced that at that moment, I would die. You humans are quite entertaining when you are inches away from death, he said. The way you squirm, the way your minds race, unable to keep a clear thought in your little heads. I was filled with disgust as he disapprovingly stated, Pathetic, before dropping me to my knees. My people can tear through yours like tissue paper. His voice agitated. How can someone like you be placed in a world like this? So filthy and dishonorable. No pride, no strength, only weakness and beggary. I struggled to focus on his speech, my coughing interrupting every inhale. Finally, catching my breath, I blurted out, Why do you speak as if you're so superior? What are you, some kind of demon? The comparison to a demon seemed to amuse Lucian, prompting him to chuckle. My dear Ember, I am far worse than what you humans perceive as a demon. A wave of anxiety swept over me, my instincts confirming the truth in his words. Nausea crept in as he laughed at my vulnerability, mocking my very existence. You fail to recognize the mysteries that surround you. Many are convinced that humans are the sole inhabitants of the universe, attributing unusual events to ghosts, ghouls, or demons. However, I exist in a realm parallel to yours, hidden in plain sight. A place you have unknowingly crossed paths with countless times and will inevitably encounter again. Your presence in my world will grant me increased power and strength, abilities beyond imagination that will inspire envy in all who witness them. Lucian delivered his speech with unwavering confidence, but I had tuned out by then. I was still trying to process the bombshell he had just dropped. What was he talking about? How could I possibly have the ability to do what he was asking of me? I couldn't wrap my head around it. He called me a weak human, yet claimed I possessed some extraordinary power. It was a conflicting thought. On the one hand, I was curious to understand how I could have such abilities, but on the other hand, I feared becoming a mere puppet if I did. Interrupting his speech, I asked, "What do you mean I exist in a realm parallel to yours? Are you talking about another dimension?" Lucian's cloaked head turned sharply in my direction. "Have you ever wondered why you are so different from everyone else?" I remained silent in response to his question. Naturally, I had always questioned how and why I possessed the ability to do things deemed impossible. As Lucian seemed poised to launch into yet another lengthy monologue, a streetlight to our left began to flicker. The sudden movement of light drew our gaze in that direction, where we noticed a figure standing beneath it. Judging by the figure's height and build, it was clear that the individual was male. "Let her go," the stranger demanded, his voice exuding unwavering confidence. Lucian instantly grew angry at the intruder's presence. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. I found myself wondering about the connection between the two, as it was clear that this was not their initial encounter. As the enigmatic man approached, his eyes came into view. They were a mesmerizing shade of green, accented by a deep yellow hue around his pupils. His gaze intensified as he sternly commanded, "I said, let her go, now." The stranger's voice resonated with authority and determination. As he approached, a sense of security washed over me. It was as if I could finally let my guard down in his presence. There was something about him that exuded trustworthiness, despite the fact that I didn't know him at all. A strange connection seemed to exist between us, one that defied explanation. It felt as though an invisible force was drawing us closer together, intensifying as he neared. I found myself gazing at him, transfixed like a deer in headlights. His presence was mesmerizing, and I couldn't resist taking a step towards him. However, my actions seemed to anger Lucian, who forcefully pushed me back against the building, causing my head to collide with the wall with a jolt. Lucian made a swift escape, with the enigmatic man hot on his heels, leaving me to collapse to my knees. I clutched my head, overwhelmed by an indescribable pain that pulsed through my forehead with each heartbeat. The rhythmic thumping of my heart reverberated in my ears, intensifying the agony. Suddenly, a hand rested on my shoulder, jolting me from my daze. Startled, I remained still, focusing solely on the excruciating pain that consumed me, blocking out everything else around me. "Are you all right?" the handsome man asked, his voice filled with concern. "My head is killing me, but I'll be fine," I replied, looking up at him. My heart skipped a beat as I stared into his beautiful, worry-filled eyes. "You have a pretty good-sized bump on your head already." A wave of embarrassment washed over me as I hurriedly composed myself. The man before me flashed a charming smile, revealing his impeccably straight white teeth. "Thank you for chasing Lucian away," I expressed my gratitude. A brief silence followed as he gazed intently into my eyes, causing my cheeks to flush once more. Clearing my throat, I asked, "Who are you?" "Aiden." "I'm Ember." He laughed. "I know who you are." "How does everyone here know who I am?" I questioned, feeling perplexed and aggravated. "This is not the time or place to answer that, my love," Aiden replied, casting a glance at the shadows that enveloped us. He extended his hand to help me up. Typically, being called my love by someone would instantly enrage me. However, inexplicably, it did not bother me when Aiden said it. When our skin made contact, a powerful electrifying sensation surged through my body. It was a thrilling feeling that I didn't want to end. Just as I was about to ask about this sensation, Aiden began to speak. "You are still as beautiful as ever," he said, causing my heart to falter as he gently caressed my cheek and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. I found myself speechless as Aiden continued to stroke my cheek and gaze deeply into my eyes. I couldn't help but wonder why his touch sent shivers down my spine and left me yearning for more. Why did my mind feel like it was in a fog whenever he was near? Aiden continued smiling at me. "Why do you call me love?" I finally managed to say after staring at him for a long time. It wasn't exactly the question I had intended to ask, but it was the one that slipped out. His smile persisted as he replied, "You will find out soon enough." He paused, then added, "When I find you." His words left me feeling perplexed, and I continued to stare at him, feeling like a lovesick preteen. Aiden began to lean his head towards mine as if he were about to kiss me. With each inch he closed the distance between us. My heart pounded in my chest. A rush of heat flooded my face and my breath hitched in my throat, while butterflies danced wildly in my stomach. I held my breath in anticipation as his lips hovered just inches from mine. When I woke up,